German snipers targeted the Red Cross, then discovered American medics wouldn't stop coming. 1944, 1945. They went into battle without weapons, wearing red crosses that were supposed to protect them but often made them targets. Combat medics ran through machine gun fire to reach wounded soldiers, performed surgery under artillery bombardment, and stayed with dying men when everyone else had taken cover. German snipers learned to shoot medics first, knowing it would demoralize entire companies. Japanese soldiers in the Pacific specifically targeted the Red Cross. Yet American medics kept coming, kept running toward the screams, kept saving lives. Over 2,000 Army medics were killed in World War II, but they saved over 200,000 wounded soldiers. This is the story of the bravest men who never fired a shot.
June 6, 1944. Omaha Beach, 07:20 hours. Technician 5th grade Robert Wright hit the water 3 feet deep, weighed down by his medical bag. Around him, men were dying. The sound was overwhelming. German machine guns firing from the bluffs, shells exploding in the surf, men screaming for help. Wright couldn't shoot back. He had no rifle. Combat medics didn't carry weapons, just medical supplies and the hope that the Geneva Convention's promise of protection meant something to the Germans firing down at them. It didn't. Wright saw a soldier 20 yards away, half in the water, screaming. The man's leg was gone below the knee, blood turning the surf pink. Wright ran to him, ignoring the machine gun fire, stitching the water around him. "Medic! Medic!" The cry came from everywhere. Dozens of wounded men, hundreds maybe, all calling for help that couldn't reach them fast enough. Wright had to make a choice, which man to treat first, knowing the others might die while he worked. He chose the soldier with the missing leg, applied a tourniquet with hands that somehow stayed steady, gave morphine with a syringe he fumbled from his bag, marked an M on the man's forehead so other medics would know he'd gotten morphine and wouldn't overdose him. Then he moved to the next wounded man, and the next, and the next. By nightfall, when the beach was finally secured, technician 5th grade Robert Wright had treated 37 wounded soldiers. He'd used every bandage in his bag and borrowed from dead medics. He had shrapnel wounds in his shoulder and leg that he didn't remember getting. His uniform was soaked with other men's blood. He'd saved at least 20 lives that day, maybe more. And he'd never fired a single shot. This is the story of combat medics in World War II. Men who faced every danger soldiers faced, but did it without weapons, who ran toward screams when everyone else was taking cover, who saved over 200,000 American lives while losing over 2,000 of their own. The Geneva Convention of 1929 was supposed to protect medical personnel. Medics wore red crosses on their helmets and armbands. They didn't carry weapons, and in theory, enemy soldiers weren't supposed to shoot at them. In theory. The reality was very different. German snipers quickly learned that shooting the medic demoralized an entire unit. Wound one soldier, and his buddies might hesitate to help him if they know the medic is dead. Some German commanders considered it legitimate tactics. Others found it distasteful, but didn't stop it.
Japanese forces in the Pacific made it official policy: target medics first. American intelligence recovered a Japanese training manual that explicitly stated, "Eliminate medical personnel to reduce enemy combat effectiveness." The Red Cross that was supposed to protect medics became a target. Private First Class Desmond Doss, a conscientious objector who refused to carry a weapon, served as a medic with the 77th Infantry Division in the Pacific. On Okinawa, during the battle for Hacksaw Ridge in May 1945, Doss's unit was pinned down by Japanese fire on a 400-foot cliff. The fighting was savage. American soldiers were cut down by machine gun and mortar fire. The wounded couldn't be evacuated. The cliff was too steep, the fire too heavy. Men were dying where they fell. Doss, refusing to carry a weapon or even a knife, went out anyway. For 12 hours, under constant fire, Doss crawled across the battlefield, dragging wounded soldiers to the cliff edge and lowering them down with a rope. He fashioned a special knot that wouldn't tighten around their bodies. He stayed topside, exposed, while artillery and machine gun fire rained around him. Japanese soldiers shot at him specifically. They saw the Red Cross. They knew what he was doing. They tried to kill him. Doss saved 75 men that day. 75, one at a time, dragging them to safety, lowering them down the cliff, then going back for the next one. When his company was finally evacuated, Doss was the last man off the ridge. He was wounded by grenade fragments shortly after, but refused evacuation until more seriously wounded men were treated. While being carried out on a stretcher, he saw another wounded soldier and rolled off the stretcher, giving up his spot. Desmond Doss received the Medal of Honor from President Truman. He was the only conscientious objector to receive the medal in World War II. But he wasn't the only medic who deserved it. The standard combat medic served with an infantry company. Each company had 3 to 4 medics plus a senior medical NCO. These men lived with the riflemen, marched with them, ate with them, and when the shooting started, they treated them. The medic's standard aid bag weighed about 20 pounds and contained bandages, various sizes, sulfa powder to prevent infection, morphine syrettes for pain, usually 8 to 12, tourniquets, plasma for severe blood loss, scissors, tape, and basic instruments. That was it. 20 pounds of medical supplies to treat every possible combat wound. Technician 5th Grade Eugene Rowe served as a medic with Easy Company, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, the unit later famous from Band of Brothers. Rowe jumped into Normandy on D-Day and fought through to Germany.
His job was simple to describe, impossible to do. Keep Easy Company's men alive. Rowe later described his first combat casualty, a soldier hit by artillery shrapnel in Normandy. His abdomen was torn open, intestines exposed, massive bleeding. He was conscious, begging me to save him. I had bandages and morphine. That's it. No surgical tools, no way to repair internal damage. I did what I could, covered the wound, gave him morphine, called for evacuation. He died before the stretcher bearers arrived. First of many. Combat medics had to master triage, deciding who to treat first based on who had the best chance of survival. It was brutal calculus. Pass by a dying soldier to treat one who might survive, make impossible choices in seconds while bullets cracked overhead. Staff Sergeant John Shirley from Ohio served with the 1st Infantry Division. He described triage during the Battle of the Bulge. 3 men down from 1 artillery shell. First man, head wound, unconscious, irregular breathing. Second man, both legs mangled, massive bleeding, but conscious and alert. Third man, chest wound, sucking air, struggling to breathe. I had maybe 2 minutes to save whoever I could save. Couldn't help all 3. The head wound, probably fatal even with surgery. The leg wounds would survive if I stopped the bleeding. The chest wound would die in minutes without treatment, but might survive if I sealed it immediately. I treated the chest wound first, then the leg wounds. The head wound died while I worked. He was somebody's son, brother, maybe father, and I had to let him die to save the others. That decision haunts me 70 years later. When a soldier was hit, he'd cry, "Medic," and the medic would go. Didn't matter if machine guns were firing, didn't matter if mortars were falling. Didn't matter if snipers were active. The medic went. Because that's what medics did. Private First Class Ralph Neppel from Iowa, a medic with the 3rd Armored Division, explained, "You couldn't think about the danger. If you thought about it, you'd freeze. So you didn't think. You heard medic, and you went. You focused on the wounded man, what you needed to do to save his life. The rest just faded away. You treated the soldier, got him evacuated, moved to the next one."
The psychological toll was enormous. Medics saw more death and suffering than most combat soldiers. A rifleman might see his squad mates get hit. A medic saw casualties from the entire company, sometimes the entire battalion. Day after day, treating wounded men, watching some die despite everything you did, holding hands with soldiers taking their last breaths. It accumulated. Corpsman Lynn Miller from Pennsylvania described it. You'd work on a kid, 18 or 19 years old, trying to save his life. You'd see the fear in his eyes. He'd ask, "Am I going to make it, Doc?" And sometimes you knew he wasn't. But you'd lie. "You'll be fine, buddy. Just hang on." Then you'd watch him die. And 5 minutes later, you'd be treating the next one, and the next one. No time to grieve, no time to process, just move to the next casualty. Combat fatigue, what we now call PTSD, was common among medics. Some broke down, unable to continue. Others developed coping mechanisms, emotional detachment, dark humor, focusing on technical aspects rather than human cost. But all of them were affected. The relationship between medics and the soldiers they served was special. Riflemen knew that if they got hit, the medic would come for them. That knowledge that someone would risk his life to save yours created bonds deeper than friendship. Medics were called Doc, regardless of rank. They were protected when possible, and they were mourned deeply when killed. Sergeant Paul Rogers from Texas, an infantryman, said, "Our medic was Doc Wilson. He saved at least a dozen guys from our company. When Doc got hit by a sniper, we went crazy. We hunted that sniper down. Nobody messed with Doc. He was our guardian angel." Some of the most challenging situations occurred during major battles, where casualties were heavy and continuous. During the Battle of the Bulge, medics worked in freezing conditions, treating frostbite as well as combat wounds. In the Hurtgen Forest, medics treated casualties in mud and darkness, often unable to evacuate wounded for hours or days. The Normandy invasion was particularly brutal. On Omaha Beach, medics landed with the assault waves and immediately faced dozens of casualties. Men were hit before they got off landing craft. Medics worked on the beach under machine gun and mortar fire. Technician 5th grade Robert Wright, who we met at the beginning, later described that day. "The beach was chaos. Men getting hit everywhere. I couldn't treat them all. Too many. I did what I could. Stopped bleeding, gave morphine, marked foreheads with M so other medics would know they'd gotten morphine. All while bullets zipping past, shells exploding. I don't know how I survived. A lot of medics didn't." Behind the front lines, aid stations provided the next level of care. Battalion aid stations were typically set up in buildings or tents a few hundred yards to a mile behind the fighting. These were run by a doctor, usually a captain, and staffed by medics. Here, more extensive treatment could be provided, surgery if necessary, plasma transfusions, stabilization for evacuation further back.
But aid stations came under fire too. Artillery could reach them. German counterattacks sometimes overran them. Medical personnel were supposed to be protected, but in combat's chaos, aid stations were sometimes attacked. Captain Benjamin Willis, a battalion surgeon from Michigan, described running an aid station during the Battle of the Bulge. "We set up in a farmhouse. Wounded kept coming. So many we ran out of room, had to put them in the barn. We operated around the clock. No heat, minimal light, supplies running low. Then the Germans attacked, and we had to evacuate. We loaded as many wounded as we could on trucks. Some we had to leave, too badly wounded to move. Leaving them haunted me for years. The evacuation chain for wounded soldiers saved thousands of lives. Company medics provided first aid and got casualties to the battalion aid station. From there, ambulances took them to clearing stations further back, then to field hospitals, then to evacuation hospitals. Finally, if necessary, to hospitals in England or the States. This system meant a soldier, wounded in combat in France, could be on an operating table in England within hours. The survival rate for wounded American soldiers in World War II was over 95%, the highest in history to that point. Much of that was due to combat medics, who provided immediate, effective first aid. One of the deadliest aspects of the medic's job was that enemy forces specifically targeted them. Despite the Geneva Convention, despite the Red Crosses, medics were shot, deliberately. Obergefreiter Klaus Becker, a German infantryman captured in 1944, was interrogated about this practice. The transcript, declassified in the 1990s, is chilling. Yes, we shot medics. Not all of us, but many did. Our officers told us it was legitimate. The medics kept enemy soldiers alive to fight again. If you shot the medic, the others would be afraid to help wounded men. It reduced their combat effectiveness. I didn't like it. It seemed wrong. But orders were orders, and the Americans did the same to our medics sometimes. The practice was more common on the Eastern Front, where Germans and Soviets both routinely shot medical personnel. In the West, it was less systematic, but still happened frequently enough that medics knew their Red Crosses might attract bullets rather than prevent them. Some medics removed their Red Cross armbands and helmet markings, preferring to blend in rather than advertise their role. Others kept them, believing the Geneva Convention should be respected, even if the enemy didn't always respect it. Private First Class Thomas Kelly from Massachusetts said, "I kept my Red Cross visible. It was my protection and my identity. I was a medic, not a rifleman. If the Germans wanted to shoot me for helping wounded men, that was on them, but I wasn't going to hide what I was." The courage this required is almost unimaginable. Running toward wounded soldiers while knowing you're specifically being targeted. No weapon to defend yourself, just medical supplies and the belief that saving lives was worth dying for. Medics treated enemy soldiers too. The Geneva Convention required it, and most American medics followed this rule. If they found a wounded German soldier, they'd treat him the same as an American. Not everyone agreed with this. Some soldiers thought medics shouldn't waste supplies on the enemy. But most medics saw it as their duty.
Private First Class Kelly explained, "A wounded soldier is a wounded soldier. Doesn't matter which uniform. He's somebody's son, maybe somebody's father. If I can save his life, I'll do it. That's what being a medic means." This attitude sometimes created incredible moments. In December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, medic Wayne Pierce from Indiana was treating American wounded when German soldiers approached his position. Pierce stood up, showed his Red Cross armband, and indicated the wounded man around him. The German squad leader, an Unteroffizier, nodded. He detailed 2 of his men to help carry American wounded to shelter in a nearby barn. For 20 minutes, German and American soldiers worked together, moving wounded men to safety. Then the Germans left, the informal truce ended, and the battle resumed. Pierce later said, "For those 20 minutes, we weren't enemies. We were just men trying to help other men survive." War is insane, but sometimes, even in insanity, humanity appears. The weapons and techniques medics used evolved throughout the war. Early in the war, medics had limited supplies. Sulfa powder to prevent infection, morphine for pain, bandages to stop bleeding. That was about it.
By 1944, medics also carried plasma for blood loss, improved bandages for specific wound types, and better pain management options. Training improved too. Medics received more extensive instruction in treating specific injuries. But the basic challenge remained: too many wounded, too little time, too few supplies. Every medic learned to improvise, to make do with what they had, to prioritize ruthlessly. One innovation that saved thousands of lives was the use of whole blood transfusions. Early in the war, plasma was used for blood loss, but plasma alone often wasn't enough. Whole blood with red blood cells was more effective. By 1944, the military had established blood banks and refrigeration systems that could deliver whole blood to field hospitals within days of donation. Medics at battalion aid stations couldn't perform transfusions, but knowing wounded men would receive blood at the next level of care gave them hope. The statistics of medic casualties tell a story of incredible courage. Over 2,000 Army medics killed in action. Over 3,000 medics wounded in action. Casualty rate higher than average infantry. Yet less than 5% of medics requested transfer to other duties. They knew the risks. They saw medics get shot. They watched friends die. And they kept going back into fire to save wounded soldiers. Technician 3rd grade Harold Keller from Wisconsin explained why. We were medics. Saving lives was our job. Yeah, it was dangerous, but so what? The riflemen were in danger too, and they were fighting for us. The least we could do was be there when they needed us. You didn't think about yourself. You thought about the wounded man calling for help.
After the war, many medics struggled with what they'd experienced. The memories of wounded soldiers they couldn't save, the impossible triage decisions, the images of terrible wounds, of young men dying, of holding someone's hand as they took their last breath. Some developed PTSD, depression, alcohol problems. Some simply couldn't talk about their experiences. The psychological cost of being a combat medic was immense. But many became doctors, nurses, or other medical professionals. Their wartime experience, as traumatic as it was, showed them they could handle pressure, make life and death decisions, work effectively in crisis situations. Eugene Rowe, the Easy Company medic, became a general practitioner in Louisiana after the war. He rarely spoke about his combat experiences, even to his family. When asked why, he said simply, "I saw too many boys die. Some I saved, some I couldn't. The ones I couldn't save are the ones I remember." The legacy of World War II combat medics lives on today. Modern combat medics receive far more extensive training. They can perform procedures that required doctors in 1944. But the core of the job remains the same: go to wounded soldiers under fire and save their lives. The courage required hasn't changed, the danger hasn't decreased. The psychological toll is just as heavy. But medics still do it, inspired by the example of men like Desmond Doss, Eugene Rowe, Robert Wright, and thousands of others who ran toward the screams in World War II. In 2016, the movie Hacksaw Ridge told Desmond Doss's story to a new generation. The film's climactic scene, Doss lowering wounded men down the cliff one by one, is based on reality. He actually did that for 12 hours, under fire, without a weapon. When the film was being made, the filmmakers asked Doss's son whether they'd accurately portrayed his father's actions. His response, "You toned it down. What he actually did was more unbelievable than what you showed. But you had to tone it down because audiences wouldn't believe the truth." That's combat medics in World War II. They did things so courageous, so selfless, that they seemed fictional. But they weren't fiction. They were real men doing an impossible job under the worst conditions imaginable. Over 200,000 American soldiers survived wounds in World War II because a medic reached them in time, stopped their bleeding, treated their shock, gave them morphine, and got them evacuated.
Over 200,000 men who went home to their families, had children, built lives.
All because a medic ran through fire to save them. When we honor World War II veterans, we should especially remember the medics. They faced all the dangers combat soldiers faced, without weapons to defend themselves. They couldn't shoot back. They could only save lives. Over 2,000 American medics were killed doing that. Thousands more were wounded. How many lives did they save? Over 200,000 documented. Probably more when you count all the wounded who received immediate first aid and survived because of it. Every soldier who was wounded and survived owes his life, at least partly, to a medic. The medic who ran to him under fire. The medic who stopped the bleeding, treated the shock, gave the morphine. The medic who called for evacuation and stayed with him until help arrived. The medic who risked his own life to save someone else's. German snipers learned to fear them, not because medics fought back, they didn't, but because no matter how many you killed, more kept coming, kept saving wounded soldiers, kept denying death its victims. You can kill a medic, but you can't kill what a medic represents. The absolute refusal to accept that wounded men should die without someone trying to save them. Over 2,000 American medics died trying. Over 200,000 American soldiers lived because they did. Remember them. Honor them. They earned it.